Some years ago, Dr. Devendra Varma commissioned Seán Manchester to write a short story in the Gothic genre for an anthology he was to edit for a Canadian publisher. The piece submitted was relished by Dr. Varma and his publisher, but other contributions from elsewhere fell short, and the inevitable delays began. The anthology was shelved till such time suitable complements arrived to complete the project. Alas, they failed to materialize. However, Dr. Varma was so impressed by Manchester's contribution that he wrote and asked him to consider creating the definitive sequel to Bram Stoker's greatest novel. He was by no means the first to make the suggestion. The seed was sown to provide a fitting tribute to Stoker's work of genius. A draft was prepared which so delighted Dr. Varma that he offered to act as an agent for the work in Canada and the United States of America. Sadly, Professor Varma collapsed and died during a lecture tour in October 1994. Seán Manchester honoured his colleague by dedicating his next published work on the subject of vampires, The Vampire Hunter's Handbook, to him. It is perhaps not too surprising to discover Manchester's first venture into novel-length fiction being a convincingly written sequel to the most popular vampire story of all time. We are immediately transported into a realm of the supernatural, about which he has first-hand experience. Dr. Varma describes him in his foreword to The Highgate Vampire as the most authentic vampire hunter in the world today. Manchester entered the world just as that vampire expert of an earlier generation, Montague Summers, was about to quit it. The Highgate Vampire is dedicated to Summers. Like its precursor, CARMEL is the mirror of the mind of its author, following eerily in the footsteps of Dracula, whilst achieving far more than a faithful restoration of those near-extinct events of yester-century. Manchester manages to resolve the problems left behind by Stoker, who probably had a sequel in mind. The result is another fearful exploration into the netherworld of the undead, wherein the reader is found wandering betwixt Victorian tombs as the contagion reaches into 20th century England. We are left to wonder whether he is drawing upon real experience. Such is his ability to lend the same of fearful fascination and haunting quality imbued in the original by Stoker. If the reason why Dracula is read and reread lies in the choice of subject, as wrote Montague Summers 70 years ago, it might also be postulated that an authentic sequel could only have been convincingly written by one author, and that this choice will assure an ever-widening readership for CARMEL.
This is the memoir of James Harker, transcribed from the original in longhand. What follows recounts a tradition made more stark in a world less able to credit its existence than that time wherein the original testimonies are recorded. Yet, as remarked by Montague Summers some 70 years prior, consciously or unconsciously, it is realized that the vampire tradition contains far more truth than the ordinary individual cares to appreciate and acknowledge. My forebears and I can attest to the veracity of such a statement. Many of the enduring scenes of the 1893 documents are set in and around Hampstead, London, and their compiler was one of innumerable Victorians who gathered in the cemetery at Kingston on Sunday afternoons, the churchyard having become a social focal point. They would assemble to pay their respects, take afternoon tea, and meet one another. Hence Bram Stoker's intimacy with the catacombs, mausoleums, and ornate sarcophagi, dominated by St. Michael's Church, which looms down upon the more extravagant examples of the Victorian obsession with death, and his acquaintanceship with the nearby heath on which the Bloofer Lady rode. No less familiar was he with the landscape of Transylvania and adjacent Wallachia, courtesy of the British Museum, and the bloodthirsty tyrant turned vampire, whose historicity was provided by Professor Arminius Vambury of Budapest. They first met, briefly, at Sandringham House in 1889, followed by the famous Beefsteak Club meeting on 30th of April 1890. Among the revelations was a 15th century manuscript that referred to Dracula as a vampire. 80 years later, a local Hampstead newspaper ran the headline, "Does a Vampire Walk in Kingston?" The answer was in the affirmative. Stoker's work comprises of documents placed in a sequence made manifest in the reading of. This sequel of sorts is essentially a memoir that brings the earlier papers, thought complete at the time, to a conclusion. In doing so, it too trespasses upon the mysteries of life and death, as the realization dawns of strange and terrible days ahead. Like Stoker, I am indebted to a colleague from Eastern parts for the sharing of his knowledge of Transylvania, which he visited several times, and his enthusiasm to see the completion of those records begun a century ago. Professor Barber was familiar with the region once ruled by Dracula, and his paper on this subject, by a happy coincidence, was published in 1975 alongside my own on the genesis of Kingston. Sadly, my dear friend and colleague did not live to see the present work completed. Moreover, I am of a kindred age to that of Stoker when he undertook to have those remarkable diaries and journals published in 1897. So it is apposite that the subsequent aftermath is now recorded in the wake of the original's centenary. All needless matters have been eliminated, as with the Victorian collection, and nothing has been transcribed wherein recollection might stray. The hunger to forget has nevertheless been consumed by the urgent desire to set down a history at variance with beliefs held now, or even 100 years ago. Events which sear the very soul in the remembrance thereof. The old ground brings with it vivid and terrible memories, as when Mina and Jonathan Harker returned to the land beyond the forest with their 6-year-old son, Quincy. Yet, unless we face our fears, we cannot exorcise them. We cannot begin anew, whilst the ghosts of the past haunt us still. And they do haunt us, despite all the outward signs of the triumph over Dracula, because something was awry, unsatisfactory, and unresolved, as Madame Mina made her final journal entry. It should have been detected, but it was not. Their adversary possessed all manner of strange supernatural ability. They, on the other hand, did not. All the more reason that they should have held fast to the only remedy by which his kind are irrevocably dispatched. Yet they did not. What should have been a moment of immense triumph, alas, was to be a moment of supreme folly. They were spared all sense of failure. The end of the previous work, set down all those many years ago in the Harker journals, is where my memoir begins. What follows conjures the most potent memories for me, for I have no doubt that such things can be. I have witnessed them. We are left with our memories at the end, and they can oftentimes be painful in the extreme. Yet we need to be reminded that there exists on this earth such as we dare not imagine. We forget at our peril. I have not set out to prove the truth I most abhor, only to resolve that history beyond belief. What began with a lone journey to that land still touched by tragedy, ending with a crusade to the same unholy site, failed to complete the circle and bring matters to a conclusion. Even Van Helsing became too intelligent to heed his own words and instincts. The circle goes on ever widening, like the ripples from a stone thrown in the water. The old wounds have not healed. The circle remains broken. It is time then to return to the beginning. For where the beginning is, there the end will be. Therefore waited and prepared with our drinks to one of the tables in the courtyard. So cold was it that we were eventually left quite undisturbed. Father Matthew had brought with him a cricket bag, which I suspected to contain the necessary accoutrement. The old chap was every bit as nervous as myself when the time came to make our way to the churchyard. First, he pressed into my hand a scrap of paper on which a name and address had been hastily written. I placed it in my wallet for safekeeping. Take this and keep it secure. I believe in the existence of these demonic creatures, but I am no expert. This man is. You might need to write to him for advice one day, though I hope and pray that it will not come to that. May our work this afternoon prove sufficient to staunch the evil flow. That day darkened with every footstep which led us towards Kingstead. The collection of revelers headed in the opposite direction as the inn closed its doors. Few people were met along the lonely path we took. Nobody was in sight by the time we reached the cemetery. The curving footway led us past the Westenra tomb, and the priest put a hand on my arm to bring it to my attention. Would you have any objection to a brief inspection? He asked. None, I replied. He wanted to test the accuracy of Dr. Seward's diary. The rusting door creaked on its hinges as the old lock succumbed to time. It offered no resistance. I motioned him to enter. Withdrawing a large torch from his bag, he led the way into that dark vault, with its mouldering mortar and dank iron, mixed with the earthy aroma of decaying coffins. It seemed as though the place itself was dead, not merely the inhabitants. He rested the torch on the catafalque facing the object of his attention, a tarnished brass nameplate. Just visible through the accumulation of dust was the inscription, Lucy Westenra. He removed a turnscrew from his bag and began to take out all the screws. Then he lifted the coffin lid to reveal the familiar lead. Only this time it was obvious that it had been punctured and sawn for the purpose of opening like a sardine can. We bent it backwards to the foot of the coffin and removed the inner lid. There lay the skeleton of poor Lucy, the sawn-off stump of a wooden stake, jammed between her bony ribs, her skull detached from its body, the open mouth as though once crammed with something. The garlic had long since returned to dust. Her long hair remained, but seemed void of color, as the eyeless sockets and fallen jaw bore the expression of a terrible, endless scream. I had seen enough and wanted to leave. So it is all true. God in heaven
surface, it is all true.
Father Matthew gasped.
We must solder that back in place and return these remains to some form of dignity and repose, so callously interrupted by us.
Pardon me, Father, but I somehow doubt that there will be time. You have found the proof you sought. The journals are valid. The testimony of my ancestors were no fiction. So we must be about our work. I cannot say how long we remained in the Westenra tomb, but when we emerged, the winter sun had become a filmy blur of pale red, fast falling behind the bare branches of trees, half hidden by the grey mist, threatening to dip beneath the horizon. Never did gravestones look so eerie and so ghastly as in this silent twilight. We rushed down the avenue of yew trees and towards the Harkavant in its rather less splendid surroundings than Lucy's lordly charnel house at the churchyard centre. We must not enter, the priest whispered, indicating that we take cover and observe from a respectful distance. I have not come unprepared for this eventuality. From his bag, a flask and 2 bread rolls appeared. A long night lies ahead, he sighed. It seems strange to be taking refreshment in these circumstances, but not unwelcome in the freezing dampness, to penetrate it to the very bones. The dank vault had also left an unpleasant taste in my mouth. When we had finished our fast, it was pitch dark. After a while, we decided to take up separate surveillance points on either side of the vault, as the path and surrounds were now lost in white mist. I was handed a torch and crucifix. Then the old priest disappeared into the dark and took up his position behind a large tomb. The weight seemed interminable as I counted the solemn tones of the church clock with each passing hour. Then, soon after the count of 12, I noticed movement ahead. It sent a shiver through me, because some shrouded in the mist were leaving the Harkavant. They blended with cypress and juniper until they disappeared, leaving me frozen to the ground in horror. Deeper into the inky darkness I peered, still paralyzed where I stood, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream. My eyes darted hither and thither, searching for another movement in this nightmare of incomprehensible happenings. This strange and unearthly family reunion. But the gliding forms had merged with the canopy of blue engulfing the cemetery, and I saw nothing more. The appalling nature of the danger passed through me like a shudder, and I managed to grope my way to the vantage point held by Father Matthew. The beam of my torch, impotently choked in curls of thick mist, lit up the ghastly white stone, now streaked with crimson splashes. I called out his name, but there was no reply. Again, clear as I approached the reverse of the tombstone. There, propped against it, was the headless body of the priest. The gush of his life force still running down the gold slab. His head some yards away, torn off in a violent twist and discarded like a punctured football. I went over to it and touched the eyelids, closing the blue, staring eyes. Another cold shiver went through me as I turned to the headless corpse and discovered that the force of the impact had driven the brass crucifix he was holding into his heart. His skin trickled, stained his cassock. It was all too horrible. Yet this emotion soon turned to anger. And grabbing the cricket bag, I headed towards the vault of my ancestors. Once inside, I set about opening the coffins of Wilhelmina, Jonathan, and Quincy. All three were empty. There is reason that all things are as they are. And did you see with my eyes, and know with my knowledge, you would
behind me! Satan!
For I understood what I wanted that night. It had become, in my eyes rather, was those incredible facts written in a copper-plate hand. I was the descendant of that brave who had fought this evil all those years ago. And now, to that number, and their progeny had become similarly contaminated. Like ripples from a stone thrown in water, the calm grows infinitely slowly, but it grows. They are selective and merely destroy those they do not choose, having satiated their need for blood in one quick banquet. Others fall under the fatal malignity slowly and succumb to more than just death. These are at great peril, from which there is but one release. I knew what I must do, and do quickly, if I was to prevent the evil spread. I hid until daybreak, having witnessed my phantom ancestors return with the mist before cockcrow, and once more entered the vault. Dragging the coffins of my grandparents and father to the floor, I removed the lids and gazed at the awful sight of 3 bloated corpses, torpid and heavy with the previous night's feast. Gaping mouths open to reveal great gouts of blood. Razor teeth stained with blood. They seemed soaked and saturated, putrid dregs of their victims. The just before it decomposed to a wizened, discolored skull. The same procedure was employed to release Jonathan and Quincy Harker from their undead slumber. They, too, returned to their true state, becoming horribly shriveled and blackened, but no longer foul emissaries of the devil. Their hellish groans reverberated down the cavernous crypt as I stood to survey my handiwork. 3 putrefying corpses with wooden stakes protruding from their torsos. What an awful sight! The appearance of several scampering rats disturbed my ghoulish muse, and I returned to the bag for more implements. Thus armed, I sawed off the tops of the stakes, leaving the points embedded in the bodies. Then I cut off the heads and filled the mouths with garlic. I stuffed the herb deep into each orifice until it jammed the jaws open. It seemed apposite to recite a short prayer for the dead, using Father Matthew's own book of ritual. Finally, the leaden coffins were soldered and the lids screwed on before each was dragged to its original resting place within the vault.